of everything that holds us together as a nation. And when an elected executive, the chief, elected executive in this country is violating and disregarding the Constitution, then he's not acting like a president. He's acting like a king, right? Right, Congressman?
100%. And you just nailed it. And the thing is, we have co-equal branches of government.
Right.
There's a legislative body, there's a judiciary, and there's an executive branch. The president cannot be juror, executioner, and like law creator. So he's tried to use the executive orders to usurp the powers of the United States Congress. He's like canceling departments that the 118th Congress 2 years ago already allocated funding for. If he were a strong president, he would ask for legislation that he could sign into law. He is breaking the laws. That's the reason there are over 220 court cases against him and 95 injunctions, and they're mounting. He's consistently breaking our laws, and we're not going to stand by and let it happen.
Exactly. And what do you think? I mean, a lot of us are sitting up here, just yelling, do your job every time we watch the Congress, and they're not, they're just acquiescing to this man and just being complicit in his madness and allowing him to assume powers that he constitutionally does not have. How is it for you? I mean, you're there in the body. We watch on TV and we just scream at the screens, right? We don't know. We're not there on the floor where you have to actually interact, where you have to actually execute, your duties as a congressperson. What has that experience been like for you? Because you were there before this administration started, and now you're watching a very different operation. Can you tell our audience just what it's like to be there every day and what's different than what was there before?
Well, please, and thank you for that, Barbara. But let me tell you what I just did, and the reason I was delayed in getting on your radio program. There's a subcontractor, I think they're called BI Incorporated, a division of Geo Corporation. Some text messages went out throughout the Chicagoland area. This is a detention check-in point and or an immigration check-in point. They were sending messages out to people to tell people to come in, and in turn, some had been arrested. So Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy and I just left this facility where we went to find out what was going on. And there we were met with a person that identified himself as an ICE officer and would not give us a name, number, or anything else, and called the Chicago police on us as sitting members of Congress, saying that we were trespassing. I'm like, sir, who are you? And what is your name?
Right.
And are you unlawfully detaining people in this facility? So that's just happening today. So I think our stories aren't necessarily getting out, but there's so many congressional people that are doing so much. To answer your first question, sitting in the chamber, that everybody there has gotten elected. Everybody there has a campaign speech. They can talk. They can laugh. They're amiable and gregarious. They're funny and all this other stuff. But then when you see their vote, you're like, are you serious? Like, that's indecent that you're cutting Medicaid, that you're cutting Medicare, that you're going to force a cut to Social Security, that it's a cognitive dissonance to see that these are the same people that are doing something so mean. And they're cordial, affable, but then you're like, wow, that's all a facade. There's something really torn and broken in this person.
Excellent.
So on the floor, you don't see it as much. People, we can all get under the same in the well and in the chamber. But then when the votes come down, you're like, wow, this is really wrong. So I'd say that most people are cordial. They're like electable to the public and, half palatable. But when you see the vote, you're like, their fruit is rotten.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I just want you to know, and I want all of our listeners to know, that your standing up to ICE is so critical, folks. You know, I've been studying, and I will continue to study the Third Reich and Hitler's Germany, Nazi Germany in the 30s and the 40s until its, demise. And just studying the way it operated, how they instituted fascism, how they, turned, the brown shirts, loose, and how they, imprisoned people and enslaved people, all of the things that they did, but also, these threats, like this president threatened peaceful protesters, right? Said that, if we took to the streets that we, would suffer. And when we are entitled to under the First Amendment of the United States, it in fact enshrines folks the right to peaceful protest, the right to assemble, the right to protest, and that government cannot, interfere with that right unless you're not doing it peacefully. So it was just, it's just amazing. And I want you to know that we know that you're a hero for standing up to ICE, because they're becoming like a Gestapo. They're just breaking, the law. They're terrorizing communities. I was just reading an article, everyone, where they were saying that entire neighborhoods in Los Angeles look like ghost towns. Nobody on the street.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, Attorney Arnwine, I appreciate your advocacy. And I haven't said enough, but you're one of my superheroes. You've been fighting this my whole life, and for that, I have enormous respect. So I went to the Capitol for the swearing in for President Trump on January 20th, and people had mixed reaction. Why are you going? So I said, no, I've got to be a witness to history, and we were called to take this oath, and I need to see the ceremony so I can be a witness. And what I saw on that day is it felt more like a hostile takeover of the government and not a transition of power. There were 32 miles of cages and fencing erected all around Washington, D.C. And President Trump had promised as his campaign that if he won, he was going to start a mass deportation. On day one, for every one law he signed, he was going to remove 2 laws, and that he thought the January 6th insurrectionists had been treated unfairly. And to hear his dark message upon his acceptance speech, and then to see him start signing those executive orders on that day, that was a Tuesday, just after 12 o'clock noon. By that Wednesday, because he had signed those executive orders, he had released with a full pardon the insurrectionists of January 6th. On that Wednesday by noontime, Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were in the chambers in the visitors gallery where the members seat our guests.
My Lord.
And I said, this man has just empowered a militia. And now he's called the National Guards out on the peaceful protester, and he's released and given pardons to the insurrectionists. I can't help but think of the book 1984. I mean, everything he says is double speak, and it's in reverse. And we're seeing that today. So in a very short period of time, now we've seen a judge arrested. The other day on Flag Day, we've seen veterans arrested. We've seen state elected officials having been killed. We've seen a member of Congress arrested. We've seen a mayor arrested. He is breaking the law. And this is why we say there was a NoKings Day. He does not have that level of power and authority. Speaker Johnson can stop him because as the legislative branch, we can. But unfortunately, they won those 2 branches on that day, and they're abusing their privilege and power to have that authority over the American people.
And what I know... go ahead, Daryl.
And Congressman, given what you've just laid out...
Hey, Brother Daryl, great to hear your voice, man.
Always great to hear you. But given what you just laid out with regards to, where Congress appears to be headed, where politics in the nation appear to be headed, what message do you give to our listeners as to what we need to be doing right now in this moment? How do we respond?
Daryl, I thank you for your advocacy and your work. There's Barbara, there's Daryl. I thank you all. And I have your vote. I vote in your interest and always want to make you proud. I thank you for coming to the Rainbow Push Convention. I thank you for being a part of the march. Don't act like you all weren't a part of the NoKings march. I would tell people, if you haven't been in a march, it's not too late. There are going to be other marches.
Right.
Don't look back on the civil rights days of the 1960s. You're in the biggest civil rights challenge of our generation, of our lifetime, that we've seen since the Civil War, that there's going to be more marches, and you need to show up. That's the only way that we're going to be able to protect our way of life. And Mr. Trump is now, let me tell you something I saw that was really sad and very disturbing. I left this facility at 2241 South Michigan Avenue here in Chicago, and there were two young men standing in soldiers' uniforms, and their names are the Reyes brothers. They came to this facility in their military outfit because their mother was called to come to this immigration check-in facility. And they wanted to make sure that their mother was going to be all right. Wow. I mean, that just hit me in a different kind of way to see these young men willing to give their life for this country and afraid for their mother. And by the president putting our soldiers on U.S. grounds, he wants to turn soldiers against citizens. That is despicable, reprehensible, and Speaker Johnson ought to show some courage, and people in the Senate ought to speak up and stand up and talk back to Mr. Trump and tell him that's wrong and it's evil and it will not stand. So you got young soldiers now that are conflicted, and I saw the canary in the mine. They're not going to stand for that.
Well, I thought it was fascinating, Congressman Jackson, that remember, one reason why we had June 14th was because the president was having his big military parade with trying to look like North Korea, trying to look like Hitler, trying to look like Mussolini, trying to look strong. And he had these visions of tanks and goose-stepping troops through the throughout the streets of D.C. And spent $45 million plus on this madness in D.C., where people are sleeping on the streets, where you got homeless, you got so many food insecure people. He had the nerve to spend all this money because it was also his birthday. And so all of this madness. But one thing I saw, going to your point, is the pictures of the troops that refused to march in unison. Did you see that?
No, I did not. I missed that.
Yes. They purposefully refused to goose step and to march in unison. And instead, they just kind of lumbered down the streets.
Yeah. I saw that. That was an act of defiance.
Exactly. That, people, there's something, Denise from Indivisible Chicago is here with us. But there's something, Denise, in the heart of Americans, right, where we just can't take this. Where we know that this whole nation was founded overthrowing a tyrant, a despot, a king. And now all of a sudden we have somebody who thinks that's what he can be. Denise, when you talk with people throughout the country, what does it mean to them to be able to, be heard in this moment?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think it's so important that those who can be heard, whose voices who have a little bit more privilege,